Well, welcome, Dr. Lisle. Here we are in episode 11 of Eat When Hungry. It's been a few months, and I'm very happy to be back with you to help our listeners unpack different things about hunger. How are you doing today?
Good. All is well. All is good to see you again.
Yes, great to see you too. I think we'll just go ahead and dive right into it. Of course, you know I like to start an episode with thinking about I am not broken and I am not fixed. And I
Yep.
think this particular episode lends itself very well to that.
Yes, absolutely.
So to start things off, I thought we would start with a story that has really helped me, and then I would toss it back to you for your perspective on it. So when I was trying to figure out my weight loss journey and figure out my hunger drive and that sort of thing, I went through a series of kind of admissions around it. One of them was understanding that moderation wasn't going to suit me very well, and that processed foods of the standard American diet were problematic for me. And specifically, I was wrangling with the idea of the addictive nature of those foods and thinking about myself as a food addict. And that was one of those truths that was hard for me to wrap my mind around, as well as when I was in the process, I started really discerning that it wasn't just overeating that I was struggling with, which is always the way that I perceived myself, but that I also was struggling with binge eating. And that is another hard truth that for me was difficult to accept about myself. And about that time, I heard what you were saying about the cram cycle.
Hmm.
And that dovetailed into the fact that I had lost a lot of weight and I had sought your help because something didn't seem right. I thought I should be really happy for the amount of weight that I had lost, but I wasn't feeling that way and something just seemed to be off. And so you had put on my radar the idea that I had perhaps triggered anorexia processes. And so I was struggling with all of those threads together and figuring out, you know, um, how am I going to succeed in this? Because I felt like I had lost this weight, but I had no clue how I was going to manage to keep myself steady. And that's
Yeah.
really what I was looking to do. And at that point, I remember thinking at a low point, how many eating disorders can a person have? And I was really struggling with all these different eating disorders in my life and how I was even going to understand myself through that. And then I don't remember if you were talking or if I heard you use the word continuum
Hmm.
about human nature. And thinking about human nature in that continuum was something that I was used to doing in other areas, and really just thinking about an extreme as just the parameter,
Yeah.
so all of us are on this, kind of horizontal continuum of where we fall in different things. And I started really thinking about that in terms of the idea of eating disorders, and that these were not disorders, but they were disordered eating patterns that were evident in my life. And that shift in mindset, to make a long story short, really empowered me. And
Mhm.
so I'll throw it back to you to just comment on that because I think that might help our listeners.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a good analogy for this. And what's frustrating is I know that there are many good analogies for it, but um, I can't come up with any on the spot. But this is it was actually you highlighted this in one of your internal mantras that it has actually been useful for me because it crystallized something that has been part of my message in this space for 25 years, which is where you said, um, I wasn't broke, I'm not broken, so I can't be fixed. That is a that is a absolutely profound insight, and the actually gives me chills to even think about this. This is the uh, the same message was other place that I got that message very stark was the in my view and views of many people, the world's leading authority on human personality, literally the study of individual differences, is Robert Plomin. And in his book Blueprint, came out about 2020. Robert Plomin, I think it's a whole chapter, and it's called "The Abnormal is Normal." And this was great to read. Yet, what he's basically saying is that when you see things that we have called abnormal psychology, and that we use pathological terminology. So we say someone is a borderline personality disorder. And if two psychologists talk to each other and they say, well, that was a borderline, it's like there's an awful lot of images that come up with that. And the notion is that this is a special class of humans that is really haywire. Now, we can even go deeper into how troublesome that whole line of thinking gets to, because then it's going to get to the fact that something was broken in their childhood with their mother-infant bond, and that's why they are the weird way. Turns out none of that's true. So Robert Plomin comes along and says, guess what, everybody? The abnormal is just part of the normal curve. Okay, that's all you're looking at. There isn't some little place out here where suddenly it's a borderline personality disorder and therefore they are emotionally crazy and you can't deal with them or anything else. No, it's not a diagnosis. It's just a person. That person has, in the case of borderlines, the way we would call this is there's a needy quality to wanting to be attached. So it's, of course, completely reasonable that psychodynamic and other theorists of psychology thought that there must have been something that happened wrong in your early childhood to cause it. That is not true. This is a native, natural characteristic of people. So there are people that are incredibly psychologically independent and, call their mother once a year on her birthday, but otherwise don't really care and have their own lives. And I don't know, maybe they study physics somewhere, or maybe they're a civil engineer somewhere. And, God, maybe they're even married. God bless their spouse, whoever that is. But the point is that that's just who they are. And then there's somebody else on the other side of the equation that has incredible need for social affiliation. And so, and if people, they want to join, sometimes they want to join people too quickly relative to normal people. So we want to be best friends right away. And then the new best friend backs away, and then they're devastated. And we've called that a borderline, but actually it's on a continuum. And you just won't see anything like that at the other far end of the continuum. Just like in very bright people, you're rarely going to see anything that you would say, oh my goodness, that looks like a mentally retarded individual. No, they don't actually do anything that even looks like what we used to call mentally retarded. Now we call it something else. But the point is, we know what it means. But we are thinking of those people down there on one end of the continuum, and we're thinking of these people on the other end of the continuum. If we say, well, the person's brilliant or a genius, well, just watch them for long enough. They're going to do some pretty non-genius things. There's going to be plenty of non-genius things that they do. You just have to wait around because they're just a person, and you've got a specific characteristics that's sitting on a bell curve. This also, just to wax a little bit, this becomes incredibly interesting and fascinating when you talk about other psychopathology like schizophrenia. So, as Plomin explains, there isn't one little place out here where suddenly you drop off a cliff and now you're a crazy person. No, it's a continuum. So you have people that are increasingly up in the high percentiles of unusual thinking. And, since I understood this from Plomin, I've actually seen quite a number of people, obviously as a busy psychologist, and I'll see people that I'm listening to them and it's like, yeah, you're almost crazy. You know what I mean? And what am I looking at? Sometimes somebody with very open, kind of a high imagination, also maybe a little bit of a paranoid stance to the world, so they don't trust the government or something, and as we shouldn't. Okay, but the point is that they're out there at the tail end of the bell curve, and I'm talking to them, and I can tell with my own eyes as a psychologist and as a person, they're definitely not crazy. In fact, they hold down a responsible job, they have a child, everything's perfectly fine, but they're a little crazy. And that's what we mean by the abnormal is normal. So that person is in a nice place in the bell curve that's a little odd, but they're not one notch further or two notches further or three notches further. And so this entire concept starts to appropriately change the way we even think about diagnostic terms. So instead of, we used to, when I grew up as a young psychologist, they would struggle so hard with diagnostic terms. Is the person that, or are they not that? Do they have another, is that the underlying disease process that is in fact that condition? This is how we were trained. Literally, quietly, and importantly, there's a revolution in how we look at this now at the elite level. It's like, no, there isn't some underlying disease process that they either have or they don't have. They're a human and they have some characteristics that fall on a continuum. And that's why I love your thing about, I don't have an eating disorder. I have disordered eating. It's like, yeah, let's get this clear what we're looking at. You're not walking around with a flaw inside your head. You're walking around with a vulnerability that in this environment, we're seeing problematic motivation and behavior out of you. If we thought that the problem, like they would have in the old days, quite frankly, and I'm sure they sometimes do, like, oh, that's a person with an eating disorder. That person is diagnosed with such and such. It's like, what are we going to use? What medication are we going to use to change their brain chemistry so that we can fix them? It's like, oh, we've got the wrong idea. They're not broken. So there's no fixing it. What we have is we have a particular personality in a set of circumstances, and they can be trapped by a motivational dilemma. And so it's so obvious now when we look at this from this perspective, because honestly, the only people that I know that are unbelievably fastidious with their eating, they themselves are diagnosable as obsessive compulsive. In other words, they've got bizarre personalities that's making that possible. Whereas, so sometimes people say, gee, I struggle with this. I'd have a hard time, maintaining a super hard line with myself on healthy eating. And it's like, yeah, that means that you're a normal human. Mm-hmm. That's what that means. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, we've opened my eyes, and as well as some other things with Shan Geisinger, with a unique perspective on anorexia itself, and that has been extremely helpful. So I remember in your case, nobody would have been able to actually understand what was creeping up with you. So what had happened, I would not have understood it without Dr. Geisinger's work, which is that you can, in all kinds of, in a fairly high percentage of people, not super high, but there's a percentage of people with high enough conscientiousness that if they lose a lot of weight in a relatively short period of time, you actually activate an instinct. It is not a disorder. It is a deep survival instinct of humanity to activate this instinct. It sits in there as a latent, it's kind of like the doctor hitting your knee and watching that reflex, and you're like, does that reflex mean there's something wrong with me? It's like, no, that's an instinctual reflex that's built into the system. If you get your knee hit with that little rubber hammer, that's how it's designed. And in the same way, the design can be to activate this anorexia thing, and and of course, before Shan, nobody understood it.
Mhm.
It absolutely looks like a disease-ish like process inside somebody's head. And from our old conceptions, that's what it looks like. And then, of course, the Freudians thought that it was because of turbulence over conflicts with the mother. Like, where else are we going to look? But it turns out, no, it was something completely different, which is that actually this person just happens to be somebody that has unusually high conscientiousness. That type of individual is susceptible to, under situations of rapid high degree of weight loss, to turn on a bizarre, fascinating survival instinct for our species, i.e., save the tribe. Okay, so yeah, uh, too many times now I have a mantra in my own head when I'm speaking to clients. Yeah, careful, don't be diagnosing them in the old way and putting them into a box. Like, I never was too much of that, but as a psychologist, 30 years in, 35, you slip in to that, and you're thinking of people in categories rather than as an individual on a bell curve.
Mhm. Mhm.
And and anyway, so disordered eating is a way better way to look at it. And then when we start looking at it, we're actually going to find something else, which is that, oh no, there's order. There is most definitely order because we see patterns.
Yes.
Okay. So we're gonna find out that the just like anorexia being activated under a highly interesting set of conditions that can give rise to this, truly for the benefit of the species, despite how bizarre it looks. The same thing, we're going to find out the same thing is happening anytime we see disordered eating. We're going to see, like, oh no, there's order under there, and it's an order that we need to seek to understand if we're going to try to help.
And that is the key of what my journey has been, for sure, is understanding all of those different patterns that have been in me and actually identifying them as patterns and
Yeah.
not as emotional shortcomings or flaws in my mind. Because the deeper I got into this journey, the more I started understanding and feeling the patterns in myself and untangling those patterns we've used. And then the part of the empowerment of going from thinking about myself with all these different eating disorders was I have disordered eating patterns that I need to understand and that I need to intercept. And that gave me a lot of power in it, and it helped me flip and reframe the shadows of these disorders in my life into a puzzle instead of problems. And this is one of the things I'm really bullish about, is that to understand these patterns in the process, if we're going to do this journey, understanding these processes takes time, and it
Yes.
takes mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
including failure, and and a process of untangling it all in order to learn from it. And from my standpoint, if we go back to our first episode, one of the things that we talked about at the end was I gave some advice, and being curious about some of those patterns as well as being practical about some of those patterns and just naming
Mm-hmm.
what those patterns are has really helped me reframe this journey and understand myself differently. And a big part of that has also been, instead of thinking about there's this disorder in my life and this disorder and this disorder, is thinking I have one hunger drive with different facets and different patterns that emerge in different times. And so, how am I going to understand this hunger drive in myself and how all of these patterns uh, work? And the deeper I got into the journey, the more agency I realized I had in choosing foods that would create satiation instead of triggering that feeling of going on the prowl, or over exercising to the point where I was purging. That was another thing that I remember at one point thinking, well, I have all these eating disorders, but at least I don't have bulimia. And,
Yeah.
I mean, I was at a low point, and then there was a little bit of smugness in me as I thought that as a probably as a self, I don't know, way to get through the moment. But
Yeah.
but then I read about exercise purges in Dr. Geisinger's work and started really understanding them, and then that was humbling as well because it gave me a different look at what I was doing and another pattern to intercept.
Yes. Beautiful. I love the interception. That's a new word, and it's a really good one to identify. The what you're saying something that you're hitting on something in there that I was wanting to follow up on, but I'll it's lost. But it was oh, this is what it was. I was trying to come up with an analogy for people that might be helpful, and the I just came up with another one. This is maybe even better.
Mhm.
The uh, certainly every young man, 98% of them, feels like a klutz the first time they walk onto a dance floor. It's like they're klutzy. They sort of know what it is. They're a human, so if you play music with a beat, they'll want to syncopate to it. That's in their DNA to do that. But if unless they've got a ridiculous arrogance, they've got some self consciousness about this, and that they kind of know they don't know what they're doing. Now, you can imagine sometimes that kind of feeling that I don't know what I'm doing and I'm klutzy. This doesn't come easy for me. And you watch other people and they're doing it fine. This can be very intimidating to the point where a lot of people will never take it up. They just won't ever do it because they'll feel like, no, I don't do that. That's not for me. And I understand that, and that's going to be true for a lot of things. But it's a good analogy because there could be something that you'd love to do. You would love to be able to walk across the room at the dance and ask a pretty girl out to dance and then go out there and actually be good enough at it that it was fine and that you didn't look like a fool. You actually looked pretty good. That would be a normal kind of a dream for somebody to be able to do that. But we're going to find that the embarrassment about it and the intimidation that they may not be able to do this because they've tried a little bit and they still look like a klutz. And then some other people are way better and they're like, oh, that's not me. They kind of categorize themselves as, no, that's not something I don't do that. And yeah, it's a shame because it turns out that it's a learning curve.
Mhm.
And if you went through with a cohort of fellow klutzes and you had a supportive teacher, and then you went through these little exercises and everybody learned together and everybody learned at a reasonable pace, then 12 weeks later, you're actually pretty good. And yet, in 12 weeks, you can look back if you had 2 or 3 dance classes a week for 12 weeks. You look back at old videos and you can all get together at the end and watch videos, and you're going to be cracking up about what a klutz you were 3 months ago. And then we have another one after 4 weeks, and we're like, oh, I'm better. And then 4 weeks, like, yeah, I'm better, but I'm still not, I can still see this mistake and that mistake. And then we see you at 12 weeks, and you're like, wow, you're pretty good. You're pretty good. And then we put on the professionals and we're like, oh, okay, well, I'm not good as so and so. You know what I mean? You can still, but now you understand that this is a continuum and you understand that you are on a journey and it's a process. And you can actually see, oh my gosh, look at what, in fact, it's a funny thing. This is a total, almost complete non sequitur, but I'm going to say it anyway. There's a man at the University of Kentucky, a psychiatrist. I don't know if he's still alive. His name was Arthur Ludwig. And he wrote one of the most priceless books that has ever been written. I didn't read the whole thing because he just goes on and on. But it's called King of the Mountain. And on the front of it, It's got a chimpanzee with a crown on its head, and it's the story of politics. It's called the psychology of politics. It is hilarious. It's all about how this is a bunch of mostly men beating their chests trying to get to the king of the mountain, and how all over the world this is how it goes. And he actually says the Western democracies are actually not the politics that you know. They're pretty tough and they're rough and tumble, but it's nothing compared to what you actually see in 150 other countries of the world. It's just some strong man trying to get to the top of the mountain any way he can. and and literally he's saying this is an instinctual king of the mountain phenomenon. And then he says something else that's hilarious. I mean, I invite anybody to read that book. I've only read about 75 pages of it. And then I'm like, okay, enough, because Dr. Ludwig is just a tireless, he just goes on and on. But it is hysterical because you see bits of yourself in it. And then you sit back and look at the world and you're like, it's funny as all get out, but it's also tragic. I mean, this is what's happening when somebody topples some dictatorship in South America. I mean, this is what happened. This is precisely some king of the mountain knocked some other king off the mountain any way he could. And then he talks about something else that's amazing. And that's that he says, and the kings never want to tell you about where they came from. No, they just arrived as the great so-and-so. He goes, if you actually look back and look at their records, they weren't particularly good students. They weren't particularly good athletes. They weren't particularly good at anything, but they had an ambition. And so this is what they did. So they want all their records sealed. They don't want anybody to know that at 9 years old, they were the class doofus, you know what I mean, in dance class. No. And it's hilarious. It's like that is kind of characteristic of human nature. We don't want people to see our development. Mm-hmm. We know we just arrived here. It's like, no, you didn't just arrive here. You know, nobody wants to see their own cute kid pictures when they were making a fool out of themselves. It's like, we hope you live long enough and you got enough humility to maybe get a little bit of a kick out of it and you can look back. But when you're 14, you know, trying to flirt with a girl or a boy in your history class, you know, this is everything. And you're trying to do the very best you can. And later on, we will understand that you were a klutz. And so people often underestimate how much of a learning process is often involved and how much trial and error. Okay. And when it comes to these disordered eating, you are, of course, it's ordered. There's a chessboard to it. There's moves to it and counter moves. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the most important things to understand is that a lot of times what we are doing now is we're trying to work against your instincts, and they're the chess master on the other side of the table. Mm-hmm. Because the chess master is over there to help you survive in an environment of scarcity. That's what built that chess master. And now here you are in an environment of not just abundance. You're in an environment of super normal drug-like abundance. You're not in an environment that remotely resembles the motivational structure or the chessboard that your ancestors had to make all the right moves on that chessboard. They followed their instincts and made moves on the chessboard. And when they did that, that became you, and that became the way to survive in an environment of scarcity. If you face those very same dilemmas now, like, oh, eat the richest food. Oh, go ahead and cram more before we go to sleep. Oh, if there's any food that might be really high calorie density that's left in the pantry or the freezer or the refrigerator, make sure we eat all of it because either the bugs or somebody else is going to get to it. Like, all these instincts were in there for you placed in a different set of circumstances. And so, of course, you're going to lose this chess game. Your instincts are absolutely going to lose this chess game. So when someone's struggling with their weight and they're overweight, they're like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know. I just can't seem to do this. And I can't seem to do that. the psychologist says that this has to do with my need comfort from comfort food because my grandmother, that was the only place that was safe when I was a kid. All wrong. A complete misunderstanding of the problem. That person, you were not broken by your history. You can't be fixed by the shrink. The problem is you are playing a motivational chess match against a chess master on the other side that is trying to guide you to win. That chess master is saying, for goodness sakes, pawn to bishop 3 here. This is exactly what you do. Yes, I'll have cheese. Okay. This is what it is. And this is why the learning curve is going to be bruised knees and stubbed toes and sprained ankles, because you're going to go against it. And then you're going to know that was the right thing, but there's going to be some consequences to this. And then amazingly, sometimes people get in a groove and they get the hang of it and they're able to play chess backwards, which is exactly what you have to do. You have to literally play it upside down and backwards in your head. And if you do it, it's actually a funny analogy. You know that people can actually learn to drive a car, by just looking at a mirror. They can do it. The brain can actually do it. You can actually learn how to drive a car if you put them in a lab and have them do it over and over again. They can actually learn to make the right moves in a mirror image. Their instincts would tell them, "Oh, we got to turn left," but no, we got to go right. And they'll actually get it wired in where they can go. You put them in that, a simulator, and literally they can be on a racetrack and have to avoid everything, and they'll do exactly the right moves after several weeks. They'll do the right moves backwards, which of course would be exactly the wrong move when you go hop in your car. Okay. It is possible to do that. You can see how difficult it would be to do that. And you'll actually find people that get there, but even that victory of getting there is inherently fragile.
Yes.
That's how that is. And so that's because it is doable, but it's fragile. And then people make a mistake of then when they crack and they go back to seeing the world right side up again, and now they're in trouble because it feels right, and now they've stepped into the pleasure trap, they'll think that there was something wrong with them that they did that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You are not broken, but you can never be fixed, because we are always playing this chess game upside down and backwards.
I love that analogy because it feels, to intercept all of these patterns, it is
Yes.
like a backwards game. And
Yes.
it's a strategy, always a strategy against myself and what I know I'm capable of, in both the negative and in the positive.
Yes.
I sometimes say that I have to take the, best of myself and fight the worst of myself with that, because that's the way that these dueling forces,
Yes.
have to play out in my life. And I think too, thinking about it as that one hunger drive and
Yes.
finding a sense of strategy and power around that, as well as I think opening up to the idea that fragility is a natural part of the journey. And I don't think that is talked enough publicly enough, because I think then people, I did it for decades, would go and privately blame themselves for it. And I
Yes.
didn't always know how to recover from that.
Yeah. Is absolutely this is yeah, that's such an important part of this. And unfortunately, some of the passionate and knowledgeable spokespeople about the space, the problem is they've been living upside down and backwards for long enough that it's now can be really well wired into them. And so now they don't understand other people's struggle, and they kind of see it as weakness, rather than, oh no, what happened was that their nervous system got right set up again for a minute. and it feels right to be right side up.
Mhm.
So this is and then there's like a frustration of whether you are the sort of the pristine, exalted enough, enlightened enough human to get there. And it's like, this has nothing to do with being pristine, enlightened, or anything else. This is inherently something that actually no animal on earth ever tried to pull off.
Mhm.
Okay. No animal on earth ever tried to go against its instincts. And so only a human could actually identify the instinctual response, recognize that it's not in its best interest, even though it's being pulled very hard, and then try to figure out a way to go against it.
Mhm.
It's like pretty fancy, really difficult. And it turns out there are patterns to the solution. So, one of the patterns to the solution is sort of some degree of relatively fastidious planning about what environment you're going to be in at what time.
Mhm.
You know, the don't be walking by the donut shop at five o'clock right before you're hungry, ready to go to dinner. Like there are certain useful things to try to help us, keep from continually tempting and teasing ourselves.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
And I think building that strategy bank becomes really very helpful too. And I think you and I, as we were having a quick touch base about this program, we talked about a couple different pathways that, people might get off track by their hunger by or misunderstanding their hunger drive, some of the scientific pieces that you know really well and that I only know a fraction of. But from my standpoint, like the first, if I'm off track, the first real strategy is calming the chaos. I know like that there are certain foods that cause chaos in me, and I'm not going to go straight to a really low calorie density notch if I'm trying to calm the chaos. I'm trying to do large scale rebalancing of meals as part of exercising that muscle against fragility because life happens. And just recently, we had water go out in our community, and it was out for a better part of a day, I think. And then we had to do boil water. Well, at that point, I had just gotten all sorts of stuff into a new kitchen, and it was like a mess, and everything needed washing and all of that. And then we didn't have water and had to boil the water. And it was just so overwhelming for me that, what did I do? I went out for convenience food. And then I did it one day and I stayed pretty close on hand. Then I did it the next day and maybe not so close anymore. And,
yeah,
and it happens so quickly. And I think I'm far less. I mean, I have to be vigilant,
yeah,
but I think the previous version of myself would not have understood that that might be part of the process is handling life and giving myself grace for that time. And then, then the third day came and it's like, okay, I have to dig in. And the first thing I did was like, let's rebalance those foods. Let's not do sometimes I do textbook days. I don't try to be textbook. I try to get all the things in place that calm the chaos.
yeah, right.
Get leafy greens and vegetables in, get the beans in, get the wet starches in. Don't worry about, I don't worry on that day like that about, what those balances are because I understand the process that becoming a textbook day is going to be far easier if I don't try to be the best I can be the first day on that. And then once the chaos is calmed, I can move to notching the calorie density and I can do the textbook version of myself that makes me feel the best and work the best and I can read those signals better and all of that. And so I think like I didn't understand that that fragility would be something that I would face again and again and again, which is why I called transform shadows, and transform is hopeful, absolutely.
Yeah,
But without understanding the fragility, I feel like it's a false promise.
yes. There's uh, My colleague Jen Hawk always gets annoyed when I come up with sports things. The but I can remember a story from probably 30 years ago. Sports story. It was interesting, and it reminds me of this. And there was a golfer, a very talented young man that could hit the ball a mile. His name was John Daly, and John Daly incredibly won two majors. He came out of nowhere and won I think the PGA, and then he turned around and won a British Open. So he was a tremendously talented young man, but he was chaotic. John Daly smoked and drank and was hugely obese, and he was a disorganized human. I'd be the first to tell you that. He was lovable because he was, he just played with abandon. But I remember a tournament at the same time. Probably the best golfer in the world at that time, I think, was a guy named Nick Faldo, who's now Sir Nick Faldo from England. And Nick Faldo was meticulous. He was very, very controlled, very cerebral golfer. And one day they went out there and in the beginning of some tournament, and they both had bad rounds at the beginning of the tournament. They both shot 78, which means you're very not likely to win this tournament because you just had a really bad round and other people had much better rounds. And the next day, John Daly went out there and shot like 84. He couldn't wait to get off the course. He just hitting the ball and hitting the ball. Nick Faldo shot like a 66 or something like that. And it might have been an 86 against a 66. I can remember the writer that was writing about this says, what a difference in these two personalities. Like one of them decides all is lost, forget it.
Oh.
Okay. The other one was like, I had a bad round that basically shot me out of the tournament, but I'm going to continue to do my very best. And the difference at the end of the next day is like 20 shots. And everybody knew that didn't happen by chance. In other words, John Daly asked for it because he gave up. He just kicked over the table and said, I don't care anymore. And it's like, wow, look what was possible if if you had stuck with it and done your very best. Look where Nick Faldo is today. He's actually still in the tournament. He may not win, but he may be in the top 5. It's like the tournament all was not lost. And this can happen with dieters. It's like, oh, forget it. I blew it. I'm off the diet. And it's like kicking over the trash can and just saying, whatever, rather than what you're talking about, which is what I call go get a B. Like, okay, you didn't get an A, and we know that you just did some D work, but your job is to work the rest of this day or the rest of this little period of time here when you're in trouble, that you work yourself back to a B. Okay, you can get there. Okay, we know you can't get an A, you're in chaos and whatever, but you can get to a B, and that's your job. And that was yeah, it's funny talking about this. That brought back a story that I hadn't thought about in 20 years. But I remember reading that story, and something as a psychologist, it noted in my mind like, wow, somebody just gave up, and somebody didn't. And to see, oh, you shouldn't have given up. Just because you had a bad day doesn't mean that this wasn't worth doing well. And that was no real shade on John Daly. It was just a feature of a personality that couldn't handle that. He was in over his head and couldn't handle it, and which is too bad. But many of our folks actually that are anywhere near this space that would be listening to this are generally pretty high conscientious people. And yet they can find themselves like John Daly kicking over the table. It's and remember, the chess master on the other side is telling you, oh yeah, go ahead, you just did the right thing.
Well, and I've shared this, that I'm a kick that all over game. Like I gave up. I mean, we talked about that with the living in the rolling hills, but learning how to live
Yes,
in the hills so that I didn't kick it over. That's part of my
yes,
journey. But I will also say that I would kick it over because I didn't understand. I didn't understand those patterns. I
yeah,
didn't understand the processes. I
mhm,
also didn't know how I could use those satiating foods
yes,
to like make it so I didn't feel like I had to have willpower all the time. And now I understand, yes, like when that water situation happened and I had this chaos, like that chaos just came back. I understood the process of how I can get from point A, from chaos to adjusting the notches of calorie density and creating freedom and peace from that chaos. And it is a process that really doesn't take very long once I understood the patterns of myself and the foods that I personally can eat and the foods that maybe don't serve me so well. And for me, it's getting rid of that salt, oil, sugar, and some other, things that I call trigger foods
yeah,
that really send my system into that chaos. And so I would hope that people would find maybe a sense of hope in that if if you can like reframe some of your mindsets around what the journey means and what it means to discover patterns and trying to take the long view of this instead of that, like we want those results right away, but
yes,
this is an inherent learning discovery process that can tell you so much about yourself. And that's
yeah,
what I would encourage people to do.
absolutely. You're learning to dance,
Yes.
and yeah, it's so we can just feel the intimidation that most, I'd say most people, but but women, a lot of women like to dance, and heck, they'll dance around their apartment. You know what I mean? When nobody's looking, but men typically won't. We're too shy and too embarrassed, and yet it's kind of an amazing thing that this thing that used to be front and center of human discourse, you know what I mean, that 100 years ago is gone, kind of almost off the earth, and everybody's intimidated by the supernormal stimuli that we just watch really fancy people dance. It's not like it's not a participant sport anymore the way it was always designed to. And so um, so people never go through this process of being completely not knowing what you're doing to knowing a little bit to knowing a little bit more, knowing a little bit more, and not having it be too embarrassing. And then pretty soon it's not really embarrassing at all. We're just hoping to get better and we're enjoying ourselves. And then we can get pretty good. And then it's like completely enjoyable. And then it's like, yeah, actually it wasn't that tough. All we had to do was sort of risk the embarrassment and put some time and energy in. And the the good news is about that we don't have the chess player on the other side telling us every time we try to do a dance step, telling us no, that's it doesn't put us in physical pain. You know, so the chess master isn't dead set against it, but hard enough. You know, modern world, too high of expectations. We're supposed to just be cool. We don't want people watching our development and something like that. And so as a result, people get intimidated out of that chess game and go to their grave and never do it. It's
Mhm.
like, it's a little sad. It's not a tragedy, but it's like, huh, if you have a daughter and you have their wedding, it'd be nice for you to actually enjoy yourself and show off a little bit. But if you've been too shy and you got intimidated out of it, then it never happens. The This journey is learning to dance. It's a strange dance. It's upside down and backwards chess play against your instincts. So it's tougher. It's tougher than learning to dance, but it can be done,
Mhm.
and and the rewards can be, in your words. I mean, this is transformative
Mhm.
for a person's life.
Mhm.
This literally puts them on a different path
Mhm.
about their natural self confidence. God knows what opportunities change, and they're also the self esteem that comes from having earned it,
Mhm.
and so this it also it keeps you have a different attitude towards the challenge, which is that when you have not succeeded and you didn't know enough and you didn't have enough of the tools and you maybe didn't persevere before all that, you're you are haunted by the challenge, but you are being cowed and unable to get past the important hurdles.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
and so it remains this thing that you never got done.
Mhm.
Um, Whereas we want to encourage people to understand, as we've had many sessions now, this is surprisingly slippery and tricky and difficult and etc. And so for goodness sakes, don't don't be embarrassed or disappointed in yourself every time you fall down and scrape your knee.
Mhm.
We should expect that. It isn't trying to get the expectations down, it's getting them right.
Mhm.
The And so, but can it be done? Yeah. But there's when you watch a couple of people dance the tango, they didn't pick that up in a day.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know what I mean? That took some doing, and this takes some doing. And anyway, we're here to shed light on some of the corners of the motivational dilemmas that have not been that get very little attention
Mhm.
and are badly misunderstood. And
Mhm.
so that's what we're here to do. And that's why you're a you're a had a friend of mine that after talking to me, she said, I feel like I'm sort of a talking lab rat for you. And it's like, yeah, that's how I see us all.
Mhm.
We're talking lab rats, like we're learning about ourselves, and yet, if we talk and we listen to other people that are knowledgeable, we can learn. And now the lab rat can learn, oh, turn left instead of right down there at the end of the maze.
Mhm.
That's where I'd like to say that's where the cheese is, but I shouldn't say that.
Yeah. I always call that like the end result of this, or like the apex of it, is the sensuality of wellness. That's the best way that I can
Yeah,
articulate. And
yeah,
that's one of the real reasons to keep coming back to it. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, this is a hard journey, but once I discovered this place that where the sensuality of wellness really permeates every part of my living experience,
yeah,
why wouldn't I want to stay here? Because if this were a pill, I would want to take it.
yes,
And it's a harder journey to
mhm,
get there naturally, but I think getting there naturally comes with heightened feelings of that well-being and that goodness. I feel like a better version of myself in
yes,
every possible way because of the way that I eat. And I knew that, there was feel better when you
yes,
ate here, but I had no idea that this really existed. And part of what I've been trying to do is take my own experience and put it into words to help maybe help, for others who might be struggling with some of those nuances to be able to put those things into words because I was looking when I was doing this for insights into the process and I got a few, but and maybe I didn't look hard enough, but I thought, well, this is what I want to share is because I've been
yes,
watching myself and naming these things for myself. So if they can help with someone else and how they see themselves, great.
absolutely, absolutely.
So,
Well, this
well,
was great discussion.
yes. Well, thanks for joining Eat When Hungry again, and we just keep slowly building up a library of resources for people.
Yes, yes, yeah. This is you are, you know, you almost kind of want to look at yourself like I think wasn't that famous statue, the thinker Rodin or somebody. The you're if you kind of look at yourself as this kind of a clay statue, fancy, and some artist has done a really real job on you, which is nature. And
Mhm.
you kind of walk around this statue looking at it from all angles. there's so much to it. And so this problem, there's so much inside of us that is doing battle with this problem. And it can be exhausting, and it can be frustrating, it can be overwhelming to the point where people just quit for periods of time, and maybe they need to. But this is a the human being is the only creature that could create the pleasure trap, and it's the only creature that can ever get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what a, you know, life quote shouldn't be this hard.
Mm-hmm.
It should not be. This is, you are not supposed to fight this. You absolutely are not. Unfortunately, you belong to a species that was ingenious enough to flip the script on nature so that we don't have to battle scarcity our whole lives, worry about starving. It's like, okay, and what's the price? Oh, the price is this.
Yeah.
You know, this is the price.
Yeah.
And so we should look at that and say, what a gift to be us, that this is our dilemma, this is our price. There are people that will be like, no, that was too big a price. I felt so bad about myself and so self-disgusted. It felt so rejected, and felt so unattractive. This wasn't worth, this was not worth the price. And they would have been right that it wasn't worth the price for them. But we should look at it as an incredible opportunity once we understand it. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, yes, unfortunately, all the sensuality of wellness that you're talking about, all of it's true. It's right there, but it requires you learning to play motivational chess upside down and backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do, and you get the hang of it, it can be done, and you can do it. But it is but you should expect it to be a struggle and not be embarrassed when it is a struggle, and not be defeated when it knocks you to your knees. It's, you're learning to dance, and it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
And you weren't supposed to have to learn this dance, but you do.
Yeah.
And so, and on the other side of it, learning to dance is walking through the world with the confidence of some young man or young woman that's walking out on the dance floor like, play anything, I know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we want to get to.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
just to your point too, there's no shame in struggling with these patterns. The things that were hard for me to admit now are like, I wonder why I even struggled with them. But
Yes.
honesty is really an important step, because you can't intercept or understand those patterns or even be curious about them to learn about those patterns if you don't really get in and name the patterns that you're struggling with. And then, of course, it's easy to look to other people for answers, but it's always comes back to what you do with the information that you have. And if it, like for me, it took so long with some of the ideas to be able to act on them, but that was really important time. I wish I would have acted sooner, but also I give myself grace for that. I found it, and
Yes.
I did it, when I did it. So we can't change those past things. So
Yeah.
I'd encourage people to go through that process of being honest, being curious, figuring out one pattern at a time. What can you do with it? And living in a groove, when I listed all those disordered eating patterns,
Yes.
like they surface at different times, but then I go for long periods of time without struggling with them, because it does become easier over time. But
Yes.
but there's no shame in the fact that every so often that human fragility and
Yes.
fallibility comes. So thank
Absolutely.
you for delving into that today, Dr. Lisle.
My great pleasure always. All right.
Yeah,
So I look forward to our next talk.
I do too. Sounds good. Bye.
Thank you.